Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is demonstrate. If you watched yesterday's video, you know that our verb was protest. And I just want to point out to start that protest and demonstrate can be synonyms or words that are very close in meaning. And what I'm discussing today is something that has been in the news quite a bit. But I want you to know that you might have more questions, and that's okay. So I will be providing links to additional information in the comment section for this video so that you can continue to learn and explore what is happening in the United States during this time. Let's look at some definitions now for the verb demonstrate. The first meaning for this verb is to show and explain how a machine, a skill, or a craft works or is performed. So this particular verb is actually one that gets used frequently in classrooms. Many teachers will demonstrate how to do a particular activity or experiment. Perhaps it's how to make a particular sentence in a certain verb tense. That's demonstrate. Another way demonstrate gets used is to clearly show the existence or truth of something by giving evidence. So we might point to a particular event or a particular set of information to show that it means something, or it demonstrates that this particular thing is happening. The third meaning for demonstrate is likely what you have seen if you've been reading newspapers, or what you've heard if you've been watching TV news, and that is to take part in a public protest. Demonstrate is a regular verb. To make the progressive form, we're going to drop the E and then add ing to make demonstrating. To make the past tense and participle forms of this verb, all we need to do is add D to the end of the word because it already ends in an E. And because this verb ends in a T sound, demonstrate, the past tense ending is going to make an id sound. It's going to add an extra syllable. Demonstrated. Demonstrated. Let's look at some phrasal verbs that use the verb demonstrate. The first phrasal verb is demonstrate against. And if you watched yesterday's video with protest, you're going to recognize the meaning here. And that is to publicly display opposition to someone or something. So demonstrate against or protest against are going to have just about the same meaning. Here's an example sentence. Thousands demonstrated against police violence this past weekend in honor of George Floyd. The opposite of demonstrating against is to demonstrate for. And this meaning is to publicly display support for someone or something. Here's an example sentence. Thousands of people have demonstrated for police accountability. Let's look at some sample sentences that use demonstrate. Today, we're going to focus on using the past perfect, the present progressive, and simple future when we make sentences with the verb demonstrate. The past perfect is made by using had and then the participle form of the verb, in this case, demonstrated. And it's going to stay that way no matter what the subject is. So if it's he, she, or they, I, it's always going to be had and then the participle form. We tend to use the past perfect to talk about an action that finished before another past action. And so the past perfect can help us understand the sequence of past events. This verb tense could also be used to talk about when something happened or in relation to how long to a specific point in the past. Let's look at an affirmative example. People had demonstrated peacefully during the day. I didn't continue this sentence so it wouldn't get too long, but it does come from a news article that then was going to note at night things were not as peaceful. So the peaceful demonstrations earlier in the day, so that's the first past action, and then there was a second past action. If we want to make a negative sentence in past perfect, we're going to insert not after had. And you might hear native speakers use the contraction form hadn't. Here's an example of that. Because many leaders hadn't demonstrated leadership, people felt it was necessary to protest. If we want to make a yes or no question in the past perfect, we'll start with had, then our subject, and then the participle form of the verb. Here's a question. Had you demonstrated very often before this week? Next, let's look at present progressive. We use this verb tense to discuss something that is in progress or happening right now. And we make it by using the present form of be, so that's am, is, or are, and then the ing form of the verb. Here's an affirmative sentence. She is demonstrating outside the state capitol. If we want to make a negative sentence, we're going to insert not after our be verb. So again, you might hear native speakers use the contractions isn't or aren't, but we will not use a contraction with am not. Here's an example of a negative present progressive. They aren't demonstrating on the freeway. Finally, if we want to make a question in the present progressive, we're going to start with that present form of be, then our subject, and then the ing form of the verb. Are you demonstrating against racism? Lastly, let's look at the simple future. And today we're going to use will and our base verb to talk about future actions. We tend to use will when we discuss facts, we make predictions, or quick decisions. Will can also be used with offers and promises as well. So here is an example of an affirmative sentence. They will demonstrate and then they will go home. So again, this could be a prediction, might fall under the category of a quick decision as well. If we want to make a negative sentence in simple future, we're going to use will not, and you might hear native speakers use the contraction form won't. Here's an example of that. He won't demonstrate past curfew. So this particular sentence is indicating somebody will be out during the day, but is not going to stay out late at night. If we want to make a question in the simple future using will, we'll start with will, then our subject, and then the base verb. Will you demonstrate at an upcoming rally? Lastly, let's look at some words that relate to our verb demonstrate. The first is the noun form, demonstration. And just like our verb, it can have a couple different meanings. The first meaning of the noun demonstration is an explanation and showing of how something works or is done. Let's look at my first sentence below as an example of that meaning. She led a cooking demonstration at school. This could be a very common form of demonstration in this particular meaning, meaning she showed what to mix together, how to mix the ingredients, maybe how to cut particular vegetables or fruits or whatever it was that she was cooking. The second definition for this noun demonstration is the one you've more likely heard and seen in this last week. A public meeting or march protesting against something or expressing views on a political issue. Here's an example of that. Massive demonstrations against racism have occurred in the U.S. and around the world. Another noun related to our verb is demonstrator. It's a person who takes part in a public protest or march. Here's an example of that. Demonstrators say it's worth braving illness to protest George Floyd's death. The last word I'll leave you with today is the adjective form of this verb. And this is not really going to connect to this idea of protesting, but it's a word you might hear. And I point it out because the pronunciation is going to change just a little bit. Demonstrative. And it means tending to show feelings openly. And so if you're kind of wondering, how do we get that meaning? You can think about people that act in a way that you know, man, they really like me or they're really happy, right? Versus some people you don't know. How do they feel about something because they are not showing their feelings openly. So here's an example of that in a sentence. His parents are very demonstrative. So we know when they're happy. This word oftentimes is used in a very positive way, so for positive emotions, and can be kind of a compliment. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Again, as a reminder, I'm going to link to other videos in about 8 different languages that talk about some of the events that are happening here in the United States and around the world. I'm also going to link to a video that is more appropriate for children in case you're a parent who has questions about how you might talk to your child or children about the events that have been going on the last 2 weeks. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.